Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're hailing from. Welcome to a very special episode of OpenShift TV. We're talking about DevSecOps this morning, and I have my, handy dandy cup of coffee. So we're doing some DevSecOps and coffee this morning. I've brought on two very special guests to talk about DevSecOps in general and kind of how Red Hat is going and is approaching DevSecOps. And as many of you know, we've had people from the Global Transformation Office on the channel before. We've had, myself talking about DevOps. We have the GitOps Happy Hour coming up later today to talk about how to implement, secrets in Git. So, to bring on Aaron Levey and Dave Meurer to come and, sorry if I butchered your name, Dave, to come on and then talk about this a little bit more holistically for the day to kind of kick things off, I think is like a perfect way to start the day. So I'm gonna, I'm the executive producer of OpenShift TV, Chris Short. You can find me on Twitter at Chris Short. Feel free to email me, cshort@redhat.com. But I will hand it off to Aaron to introduce himself. And Aaron, if you want to hand it to Dave when you're done.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everybody. Aaron Levey, head of the global security partner ecosystem at Red Hat. As Chris mentioned, we're going to talk about DevSecOps. That's what my team focuses on, security around DevOps. So we'll dig more into that in a second. Dave?
Yeah, thanks. So Dave Meurer, and you got it exactly right, Chris. Nice job.
Thank you. I forgot to check that. That's always something.
Yeah, no worries. There's a couple letters in there that really don't make sense. I get it. But I am the principal solution architect that's focused on our security ISV partners and helping Aaron and Red Hat teams, define DevSecOps. I'm actually relatively new to Red Hat. I don't know if I can say that, but I started back in February. And before that, I was in app dev security for about 9 years. And before that, did various app dev roles, both development and selling app dev software. So
nice. Okay, cool.
Really excited to be here and talk to you all about DevSecOps.
Awesome. So yeah, DevSecOps is something that is near and dear to my heart. Obviously, if for y'all's knowledge, I spent 11 years, or before joining Red Hat, in the DevOps field, kind of like, twisting the wrenches and hammering the bolts and things together. When I say hammering bolts together, I literally mean that because that's how it feels sometimes, right? Like, take this disparate piece of software and make it work with this other disparate piece of software in perfect harmony. And that's often very difficult. And I'm glad you're here to talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we are trying to address, right? We talk about, and this conversation is relatively new, right? So things are not mature in the industry. It's not like everybody even agrees on what DevSecOps means.
Mm-hmm.
There is a very broad definition that goes beyond what we're going to talk about today. And Red Hat has a point of view around that. What we're talking about is mostly containerized DevSecOps, right?
Mm-hmm.
Container DevOps lifecycle. But there is a broader view with secure supply chain and all sorts of other things that are not necessarily require containerization or even involve containers. But today we're focusing on the one thing, and as you mentioned, I like to use these terms glued together versus woven together. And what you did, and we've all done. I mean, I worked in operations for many years in healthcare. I ran data center teams.
Oof.
And the glue together is always happening, right? Mm-hmm. Well, we got to figure out how we're going to do this. Well, let's FTP this file here, or do whatever, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then right something to screen scrape the mainframe. Like, I'm dating myself now, but
yeah,
I know I'm old, but that's what happened.
But I remember stuff like that, right? Like, totally.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I did a lot of scripting automation of things to glue it together. So instead of trying to glue things together, that's some of the frustration. Well, we've got some data we'll show you. We don't want to make this really data heavy, but there's a couple of points in a couple of different surveys that I think are really relevant. And we talk more about weaving things together. because that's what truly we feel we do with Ansible and with operators and some of these other things that that the technologies allow us to use APIs better and do these things so that things are working harmoniously together, instead of kind of walled off and then you're throwing things over the wall, or you're trying to bore a hole through it to get it to work. So maybe we give a little bit of that data, show some people what the people out there are saying, and then what some of the executives we're talking to are telling us.
Yeah.
Cool.
Dave is slide master, so
yeah,
he's the solution architect. He's technical. He's the only one that can work this.
Well, yeah, I mean, to your point about dating yourself, Aaron likes to tell me about his punch cards and Commodore 64 and things like that.
Commodore,
I had a Commodore 64 as a kid, and I've got a punch card hanging up on my bulletin board right here.
Love it.
There's nothing wrong with that. Right? Like I've been hands-on in tech since I was like 6, right?
Hey, look, punch cards was my dad. All right,
exactly. Yeah. Punch cards was way before my time.
I may look that old with all the gray, but I'm really not. So let's talk about this. This is probably not going to surprise anybody that's watching. This is stuff that you probably do every day.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really interesting validation now. This was IBM did a survey around how the survey wasn't even a tech survey.
Right.
It was around what the future of business is because how COVID is changing it.
Right. Okay.
This was buried like 3/4 of the way into the report in, I think, 1 or 2 paragraphs. I mean, it's not about tech.
Right.
But the fact that the executives called out that the tech is now so much more important,
mm-hmm.
I think it's pretty compelling, right? When you talk about they're going to implement security twice as much as they do today, and then they feel automation across the board in all business functions, which of course would include DevOps and security and all these other things. It's pretty impactful. And then how it affects us on our team is at the bottom, you'll see they talk, and there is data. I removed some of the percentages, but it's like a 3x multiplier that versus in 2018 versus today, what they think the value of an ecosystem and a partner network for those technologies require to be successful. So they think 3 times as much today as they did 3 years ago that is required to be successful.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty telling, right? Like,
yeah.
And this was buried in a report about like changes because of COVID, which
just
right, like
changes, like remote working and all sorts of stuff. So it wasn't related to technology specifically. And I'm just reading this report kind of randomly.
Right.
And buried 3/4 of the way down is a paragraph, maybe I think it was a paragraph and a half or something that talks about this, right? I thought it was pretty compelling. So it validates the work that Dave and the rest of our team have been doing, and across Red Hat,
mm-hmm.
We're really examining what DevSecOps is. We've got a team of 17 people, a virtual team, right? So this is a lot of people doing this in their spare time because they think it's important. And then they've been helping us build this framework and understand how the Red Hat pieces fit in to make it real. Dave, you want to hit the next slide real quick?
Got it.
Thanks. This is a little bit of a double click, a different report. This came out earlier in the year, but this is pure customer feedback. And the customers, we didn't do this. This is not a Red Hat survey. It's from the state of container and Kubernetes security. So it's done by one of our partners. But the telling thing is that on the left, we do a little bit of data security in our framework that we're going to talk about, but the rest of all of those things are DevSecOps, right? There are pieces of DevSecOps. And that's the entire thing that they're saying. All of our security challenges around containers are that. Now remember, this is Kubernetes in general, not OpenShift.
Mhm.
At the bottom, you'll see that we do, OpenShift builds in the hardening and the orchestration. Then on the right side, what about deployment? So left is security, but what about deployment? Well,
Right. Like,
not surprising. Security is
yeah.
number one, right?
Mhm.
So
It's interesting how we've moved so rapidly from like, oh, secure the border and defense in depth to now we are like security in the actual software development pipeline, right? Like within
right,
20 years, we've gone like so deep
right.
into security in software and code. It's amazing to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I
such a
have-
great point. Yeah,
Go ahead,
Chris,
Dave.
because sort of going back to what Aaron was mentioning at the onset, that a lot of the DevSecOps discussions you see today might just be like one of these items on the left, pipeline,
Mhm.
for example,
Yeah.
or network segmentation. And I think OpenShift and Red Hat has addressed a lot of these on the left, and we'll see some of that when we go through it. But Aaron and I and Red Hat as a whole, I think, are in a unique position with our partners who do a lot of these point solutions to see it holistically, right?
Hmm.
So we can understand DevSecOps from start to finish.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, I mean, to that point, Dave, do you want to, what's the next slide? Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
this is really high level, right? This is absolutely a marketing slide. No doubt about that.
Nothing
But
wrong with marketing people.
no, I mean, is that, for technical people, which all of us are, like we look at this and go, yes, okay, great, but and I realize that, but we built it, and I will admit that our team built this, and we built it to try to simplify it as a starting point. Like, okay, if you don't understand, if the person we're talking to doesn't understand DevSecOps, right, and they don't understand how these things touch each other, and
Right.
the fact that these different pieces of the cycle are related to each other, even if they're development or operations, you have very similar pieces of the life cycle, and you have things that have to touch all of those and cross those boundaries. So this was meant to do that and to show that culture and process needs to be wrapping all this. It needs to understand what's inside to be able to do it properly. And if you're, gone are the days of, if you remember, well, everybody is a security person. Every developer needs to understand security. That was never going to work. Like, you can't make a security expert out of everybody, and you shouldn't. Right. And so what's happening, luckily, is the tools are catching up to take the place of the need to be an expert. Right? The tools are removing that so that the developer can be the expert at developing and the expert at building apps in a iterative, agile way, so that they're coming out with updates every week or every month or whatever they need to do, instead of always going, do I understand every aspect of security in the code that I'm building?
Yeah, and I would just add that you're right. Developers shouldn't be experts. That doesn't mean they should be trained on certain, security aspects, which I think are very important.
Right.
But one key thing that you might not see and you don't see in this diagram is that security teams are an important part in this as well, right? And that goes to the culture.
It's at the core of the right. Like, right. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah. So DevSecOps is inviting those security teams into the meetings and the transparency and the collaboration.
Security people. Yes, exactly. Right. Like, have a seat at the table. Let's discuss how to integrate what you need with what we need. Right.
Yeah. Which goes to the point that Aaron mentioned, because the security teams are the experts. So bring them in where, they can be that expert in these meetings to help DevSecOps actually become a reality. So I think, that's
exactly
a good point.
Well, what we're also hearing is that the teams are starting to merge, which is a good thing, right? So now it's not, well, they told us that we need to do whatever.
Right. It's not someone throwing darts at a dartboard. Right.
Exactly. and what we're hearing is that not only are they merging, but they're merging pretty quickly. So either what's happening is they're taking security people and bringing them into the team for DevOps, or they're just literally merging those teams together to create one DevSecOps team, even if they don't call it that, right? So we're seeing that happen more and more. I think we have on one of the slides, we had a statistic, I don't know if it's still there, that talk about what percentage of organizations are doing that right now, but it's pretty high. It's, you know, it's a large set of organizations doing that. And we've got to start thinking about things as not development and operations, right? We can't bifurcate things like that, even though we can still somewhat talk about it, because there are tools that are focused more on one side versus the other. And then there are a few like secrets management and so forth, privileged access management that weave itself into all of those pieces.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we'll show you that a little bit in a future slide. We've got a framework that we've built with our partners that try to simplify and explain how there are multiple categories and multiple technologies, and some of them can be used in many different places. And you know, a lot of people they need a roadmap, right? It's too complex. And the executives have been saying that it's too complex. We need help understanding it.
Yeah, go look at the CNCF landscape and tell me it's not complex.
Right.
You know, like if cloud native is the future, having a opinion about how you should secure that cloud native future you're going to have lots of them, right? There's going to be thousands of opinions potentially. So getting down to something malleable and workable, I think, is what's important, right? Like it's not necessarily the right solution, it's the right solution for your organization, right?
Hey, Dave, do you want to pop the next slide? We're going to talk to these slides, have a conversation on each one. How's that?
Sounds good to me. Yeah.
Saw the real high level stuff before, right? And that you could really apply that to anything. And in this slide, what we do is we try to show you a half of a click deeper, right? How Red Hat helps address that, how our partner ecosystem adds to that. And you know, this is another marketing slide, but we help our customers with innovation labs and partner consulting, managed services, right? We also have a lot of partners that do those things, right? So that layer crosses under the partner ecosystem completely, because a lot of those are SIs, GSIs, solution providers that are doing those things with us, right? And you know, we're collaborating with several of them on our framework right now. Some of the really big solution integrators, a few of them have told us we don't do this today, but we want to. And then a few of them have told us, you know, hey, we're pretty heavy in DevOps, but we don't really have an opinion on the security pieces, right? And we don't know what works best with Red Hat technologies, right? Because it's still so early days in this, and that's what we're helping those organizations with, which will end up delivering those to the end customer. And then of course our field, we're working with our field to bring them up to speed on this. We're actually officially launching a campaign this month around that, externally and internally. So this conversation is part of that.
Nice.
Yeah, and I would say, look, you know, for me, looking at this slide from a technical perspective, there's a couple interesting points. One is DevSecOps is not just a technology problem, right? You can't just throw technology at what you're doing today and pretend that you're doing DevOps or DevSecOps. There's a huge piece around culture that needs to happen. We talked about it a little bit as well, right? Inviting security teams in, being more transparent.
It's the hardest part though, right? Like
it is. Yeah. It is.
And that's why like people have the hardest time embracing it, if that makes sense, right? Like, because you have to change your mindset a little bit, right? Like you have to think about things a little bit differently.
And sometimes it just takes, you know, one step to say, let's get a meeting together between ops and dev and security. Like I've been in meetings where you go to a customer and the ops people don't know who the dev people are, and you're introducing them as an outside party.
Yeah.
So So yeah, culture is the first and probably most difficult thing to get by. Obviously, Red Hat can help with that. We've got a lot of experience and expertise. And once you get that culture down, the other thing that jumps out at me here is the top two boxes, right? It's not just Red Hat. Red Hat does a great job of providing a secure, by design platform with an OpenShift with a lot of neat security features. But holistically, looking at DevSecOps, our customers either have some solutions that are laser focused on certain security functions that enhance, what Red Hat does. And quite frankly, in the development life cycle and the DevSecOps cycle, Red Hat doesn't have features that you would probably want to look at. So combining our partners with Red Hat technology really provides, what this title says, comprehensive DevSecOps.
Awesome. I think the purview that we get is more holistic sometimes than say like a security team wanting to come in and say, hey, we need to better secure the software supply chain, right? Like they're already coming at it from like their own silo, right? So having kind of a trusted party there, I feel like does help in a lot of cases, right? Whereas if you're doing it, kind of going at your own, you kind of have to build up wins and win people over kind of piece by piece. And you can kind of shortcut that sometimes just by having a group conversation about the needs from both sides.
Right. Yeah, and customers are smart, right? I used to work for one of these sort of solutions that focused very well on application development security. And we'd go in and sell a software and it would work, but we'd always get questions that from customers that say, hey, what about, network security or platform security?
Right.
We knew that wasn't what we did. So we'd have to say, well, you want to look at these folks, or, that's not in our scope type of conversation. So yeah, there's a lot to this. And so it's
I think what, Chris, you mentioned earlier, like, okay, it's not just perimeter security, right? Now, yes, most of the attacks today are coming at the perimeter. Not a surprise, right? But if you secure, you'll hear shift left or whatever term you want to use, but if you secure closer to the code, closer to the development cycle or during the development cycle, right, it becomes less penetrable. It becomes less of an attack surface. So yeah, maybe most of the attacks are coming from out here, but if your armor is all the way through your body, right, for a bad analogy, but it doesn't matter. It can penetrate the outside, but once it can't do anything, right? So that's part of it. You can't just say, well, we want to be, imagine like, oh, I just want to be strong on the outside, but not on like, that doesn't make any sense from a human standpoint.
Right.
I want to be really muscular, but super unhealthy inside. Like, no, you don't, right? So that's the whole thing is make sure that you have security where it matters, and it matters through the whole cycle. And it matters, at the platform, at the OS, in the code, to make sure that you're not inherently bringing in artifacts that have especially known vulnerabilities, right? That's what you can control, and make sure that those things are as secure as possible before they even get out to where they can be touched by an attacker, right? So it's, you can't just build an exoskeleton and just hope that nothing ever penetrates it.
Yeah, we used to have a term called inside the wire. Like if you have this great defense on the exterior and somebody just happens to throw something over your wall and it gets through, now you have somebody inside the wire doing whatever they want. And if they're inside your fences, that means you are now on 100% defense actively. And that is never a good position to be in, ever. You want to try to minimize blast radius and keep things as, segmented and not isolated, but positioned to not take out other things, right? In the process of them being compromised. Like, you need to assume compromise could happen.
Right.
That's like one of those culture changes, right? Like, assuming that somebody's going to break in first and then working from there, right? Like, that's one of those leaps you have to make.
Yeah, think about it if you're an ops team too. Like, if you're overwhelmed right now and you're monitoring everything in the world, what if you could see a noticeable drop in incidents, right? As the left side of the cycle ramps up their security practices and their automation and their tool sets, right?
Mm-hmm.
You should, at least over some period of time, be able to see that those incidents, those, not necessarily the attacks, but the penetrations and the actual incidents that happen, that rate should go down as your security gets better and your processes are woven in and your culture is working over here. That's what should happen. And there should be a correlation to that. You should be able to actually measure that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you read some of the great work from Nicole Forsgren and that group, Accelerate, the State of DevOps report, I think last year, said that, like, speed is the kind of all-out indicator of safety, right? Like, if you can release quickly, you have automated security in place, and probably to an extent some automated remediation capabilities as well. So you can release faster, and that actually creates safety, because you have to build that, hardened security pipeline to make that happen, to enable that capability.
Yeah, that's the point of the automation tools and the tools that we are working with for around OpenShift, is that those tools shouldn't impede the speed. They should actually improve the speed, right? Remove the manual process.
Yeah. It's not, okay, stop for security. It is now, security is a stop along every part of the chain, right? Like, you're if you're building an image, it is now being signed. If that image is signed, it is now being scanned to make sure it is, in compliance with everything, right? Like, it is just a little checkbox along the way of every part of the pipeline.
Right, exactly. And ultimately, how many issues are you going to capture before they happen? And so while you may say, well, it's going to pause it here for some period of time because we found something earlier. That's cool. But imagine if you didn't find it, right?
Yeah, that's a good thing.
if your customers find it, now you're down.
Yeah.
Now you're back, you're back revving the software, the last version or two versions or however many. Some people, release very quickly. And so now you've got to chase it down and figure out how many versions back do we have to go, or what piece of the code did that, and you're trying to do that in production. Not optimal.
It's tough. No, it is not a good situation to be in, and I've been there, and it sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been on the ops side, right? Not on the dev side. And even it sucks for the ops guys too, because their customers are yelling at them. This application just came out, it doesn't work, and we're going, I have no idea, no clue.
Well, here's their documentation. It is 5 pages.
Desktop or the app or whatever, Like,
right.
So, hey, Dave, do you want to pop to the next slide? We'll show you. Just we'll do a little bit of advertising for our team here for a second, but this is our partner ecosystem. These are our strategic partners. And, you're going to say, hey, there's a lot more partners, right? We have a lot more partners in this from technical side, right? But these are the partners that we work with our framework around, and we try to make sure that they weave together. So a lot of other partners may weave in, may not. Some of them glue in, right? All of our partners have to be certified, of course. It's kind of a, that's the ticket to get into the door. But this is more than that. We have some engineering with many of these. We have a lot of customers in the field that are using them today. we have experience working with these partners and making this real, not just, hey, we're going to throw a logo up there because we like them, right?
Right.
This is, we've got a framework that we've built that they fit into. They solve a problem, and some of these do have competing technologies, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not completely, just throw anybody in there and it's going to work great kind of team, because we don't know that. So
Right.
what we've done is we've said, these are the ones we know work great, and they work great with us, with OpenShift,
Mm-hmm.
and they work great with our engineering teams at Red Hat, and they're in the party, right?
Yeah.
They want to do this with us. They want to make sure that OpenShift is the top platform to make sure that DevSecOps really happens in customers' environments. And I mean, hopefully most of these names, if not all of them, are extremely recognizable. And then, we've got other stuff that we're not going to show today, but we'll show you one example of how this stuff all fits together, right? How it's woven together. We have one example of that, but there are who knows how many, possibilities there. This is a preview at the top and at the very bottom of the categories, right? So working with,
like the top half of this slide is, I think, probably like the best like starting point for a checklist, right?
Yeah.
And the bottom half is kind of like, here's tools that can check the boxes for you on an automated fashion kind of way, right? If you glue them together, right?
Yeah, and I think that this kind of also relates back to the conversation we were just having in the previous slide around culture and balancing that speed and accuracy. So we're not telling you, you need to implement all 32 security methods that you see here on this slide, right? You need to look at your environment, look at these partners, and say, what in my environment makes the most sense so I don't slow my developers down and I get the appropriate amount of coverage. So that's why we're working with these partners to fit them into these different security methods and providing, sort of frameworks or blueprints or however you want to call it to have that discussion, right? To say, hey, if you're looking at application analysis, you might want to think about static analysis and SCA and maybe interactive analysis, but do you need, image risk or dynamic analysis? So those are questions, that to have with customers or to have amongst your DevOps teams to ensure you have that full coverage.
Yeah, I think, a lot of this is going to be familiar to the audience. They're going to say, hey, we've seen IDC, we've seen Gartner. Some of the categories are different, right? Everybody has a different taxonomy on how they do this.
Yeah.
What we've done is we've made this very specific to OpenShift, to Kubernetes, right? To the DevOps cycle, and tried to work with our partners and our customers to say, first of all, how do you run your business, right? Like, what you're going to see on this slide is some of those teams are separate teams today. Like there might be a team that does audit and monitoring completely separate, compliance completely separate, right? But they need to be woven in. At the same time, we need to be able to account for a lot of customers still have separate teams. How do we address and help them, and then help them integrate into the greater whole seamlessly and weave it in? So it's taken a long time for us. You think, oh, there's only 9 labels. It's 9 labels, but there's so much gray area in some of these technologies. Like, where does it really fit? Well, it kind of does a little of all these things. You're like, no, like, what does it really do? Like, tell me what the core of your software does. So that's what we focus on here. Yes, you can get a couple of the vendors that do a lot of different things. But what we do is we try to explain, one, what the core value is, or the core values. A lot of them have multiple technologies to add to Red Hat technologies on OpenShift or with Ansible. And then in some cases, right, individually especially, we will point out those finer things that they add to the party to enhance OpenShift itself, right? But what you'll see is if there's multiple vendors involved, because in a lot of customers, you're going to walk in and a customer is going to say, we already use this vendor. We're not displacing them. And we don't ask anybody to do that. So what we
Right.
now know is we now know where those overlaps are based on our framework, because we work with the partners, the ISV partners, to identify those individually. And we can say, okay, you're doing these 3 functions with this partner, with this vendor, no problem. We can supplement over here with these other 3 with another vendor. And we just won't use those features or functions from that other vendor, and it won't conflict. So it's a lot. When I say weave together, it is absolutely weaving things together and knowing where those threads are. Otherwise, you're going to have conflicts. You're going to have challenges, making it work together.
Yeah. Needless to say, there will be many bumps along the way.
Right. Right. Hey, Dave, do you want to pop into the next slide and we
Sure.
can make it?
Yeah, and as I do that, I just want to mention the other key thing with this slide and the next slide that you'll see is, Red Hat's platform security, and you see that sort of in the gray items here. Another item we like to talk about is the difference between just community Kubernetes and OpenShift, right? And the security features that you get with OpenShift, like SE Linux, which is on by default, C groups, namespaces. You've got things like a secure host with CRI-O, or a container runtime with CRI-O, and network policies, runtime security policies, RBAC, IAM. So there's a bunch of security features in the platform itself that we do obviously talk about with our customers and with our partners as we go to market. And our partners value that as well, right? Because they don't focus on the platform. They focus on their software, and sometimes they focus on the applications on the platform, or more enhanced, for example, network visualization. So just wanted to make that point as well. But yeah, Aaron, go ahead on this one.
No, that's great. I mean, this is just a visualization of the framework, right? And it helps, especially, I mean, even some pretty seasoned DevOps people have looked at this and went, wow, I didn't know you could do, I don't know, secrets vault over here. I didn't know that, this could help here or there. It's been pretty interesting. You'll notice that there's a lot more security technologies on the right-hand side. But as I mentioned earlier, the whole reason is because it's more of an attack surface over there, right?
Right.
Usually it's harder to get into the dev environment, but and attack that. So it's going to be heavier on the right. And I think technologies are also somewhat combining and consolidating on the left a little bit. You're going to see some of that happening over time. But again, this is it's a puzzle piece, and figuring out with the customer what the right puzzles are, right pieces for their puzzle is what we're trying to do here in a very simplified way. This is a framework. This is not the end result of a discussion with a solution integrator or a consultant at Red Hat or anything like that. This is a starting point. And then Dave, if you want to pop to that next slide real quick, we can come back to this if you want. But this is that next step to say, let's figure out what you already have in the environment. Let's figure out what Red Hat does, and then what partners are going to add to that, and make that decision tree of hey, we know you have 15 different partners, strategic partners, Red Hat, and let's figure out how those fit. And it's not to say that one of these logos could be a non-strategic partner because that's already in the environment. That's okay. This starts to map out what we're going to do, and there's way more depth that we're not showing today at all around schematics that show it in the environment. How does it deploy? How does it talk to the other applications? Is it Ansible tying it together? Is it direct API communications? Like, what's really happening? And we go, that's the next step from here, is to design that with your solution integrator, with your partners, and make that real. And now you come in and you walk in to your boss, whoever that might be, and you show them this and you say, this is actually what's working in our environment, right? And this is what's making it secure. And this is how they play together. Very few people can do that today.
Right. The amount of glue that we've applied here, for lack of a better term, I was trying to come up with something more creative.
Weaving.
But
not glue.
Right. Like, but just like pointing people in the right direction here is a huge step forward, right? Like in getting the right kind of environment built. And sometimes, like, maybe you don't want CyberArk, maybe you want something else. There's different partners that we can work with, it's
right.
It's a 100% kind of, we have opinions, but maybe you need to work with something different. And you can thankfully drag and drop a lot of these things in and out because of the wonderful cloud native platform of Kubernetes underneath everything.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting talking to a lot of the SIs, big and small, right? Global, regional. Several of them are well versed in DevOps, and they understand what's on the screen, no problem. And they'll say, well, we're completely agnostic. We just use whatever the customer wants. And I go, really? But you're the consultant. And now you're asking the customer to, do you hear that?
Yes.
Yeah. Alexa, be
it's the best part about working from home.
Jeff always has to get his word in. My response to that is, why would you want, you're the consultant, why would you want your customer to go out and try to figure out what out of the landscape of maybe a dozen different tools to do a specific function, why would you ask them to go spend months evaluating it on their own when they're saying right now they're not the experts, you are.
Right.
You should be the expert. So while you may not walk in and just say this one is the best for you, and sometimes you should know. You should know your customer's environment. You should know the product set on the market, and you should be able to walk in and say, this is the best product for you because of this, right?
Right.
And especially on a platform like OpenShift. And that's what we're saying is, while we have multiple partners that can do the same thing, we're saying they work best on our platform. And we're definitively saying that when, some of the vendors won't, some of the SIs won't, but they're changing their tune because it's hard work, because they're saying, well, we support the open source Kubernetes, we support this, we support that. We can't be experts on what's best on all of them. And so think about it. If the global solution integrators are saying that, how is a customer going to get through all of that?
Well, they're not. And that's the disadvantage, right? Like Wild West is one thing, right? Like you get a lot of choice, but you might not make the right choice for your organization, and you might end up redoing work because you're not taking advantage of the potential of all the lessons learned from an integrator, or just having a trusted partner on board.
Right. So it goes from, yes, everybody wants optimal, but there's so many choices and it's so difficult to understand all the complexities that I don't even think optimal is a goal. Like, just not bad. Like, so
not complete garbage. Thank you.
Right. I mean, so if you're a customer, your goal is, I hope it works, right? And I hope it works well, but I just don't want it to be bad. I don't want it to make things worse. And what we're trying to do is say, that's not good enough, right? We want to make it optimal, right? We want to make it at least good, not okay, not it just works, but good. And then potentially, depending on what else your environment throws at you, optimal. And so what we're saying is, this is what's optimal in our mind for OpenShift, with working with these partners, working with the solution integrators, and all the technologies that it weaves into. This is optimal for you, not just for everybody, because there's not a one size turnkey, everything just works, everything's magic.
Yeah.
But for you, we're going to help you create an optimal solution, and it's not going to take us 10 years to do it, and you're not going to have to do 6 months of your own research and get the dog and pony show from 5 different vendors.
Right.
We've narrowed it down to a couple of vendors that should work in every situation. We're going to talk to you about it. We're going to pick a vendor or two, hopefully just one, that we understand is optimal for you based on your other tool sets, right? Whether you use GitHub or GitLab or whatever you use, we'll understand that. And we're working with the SIs to get them to that point with OpenShift and with this framework.
So there have been many, many requests for the slides. Can I get access to them so I can share them before the event is over? Just give me the link and I can get them shared out. Don't worry.
Yeah. Well, we actually, this is the first time we've publicly, we've shown these to partners, we've shown these to SIs, but I think this might be the first time in mass market that we showed these.
Yeah, I think we did a couple webinars where we showed this slide, but it's in this example. But yeah, you're right. We're and we'll talk about the webinar series we're going to do, and where we show a couple versions of this with our partners. Yeah. So one partner in Red Hat and how those two fit together. But yeah, I think you're right, Aaron. This is sort of the unveiling, and it's been, you know, our partners. Yeah, our partners.
Our chat is just like, they are eating it up and they love it. This is so helpful, right, to a lot of people right now.
Are there questions? Because this is kind of it. Like, I mean, we could talk on this for 10 years because
exactly
so much, but yeah.
Well, I'll say two things. One is it's great to hear our partners have been saying the same thing. They've been using this in customer conversations as well, and it's been helpful. The other thing is, you know, from a technical perspective, you know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, you look at this and say, man, this is going to take me weeks, if not months, to deploy, right? I think with containers, especially OpenShift and operators, deploying some of these things is pretty straightforward. Now, if you go to the left and you think about IDEs, and there's plugins, which is easy to implement, and then maybe there's some Tecton pipelines, which we're working with our partners on, creating certain tasks, which will make it easy to deploy. But on the right side, within Kubernetes, OpenShift especially, it's a click deployment. And now with Rackham, right, advanced cluster management, there is a facility to ensure that some of our partner solutions are deployed on your entire fleet of clusters. So deployment has definitely gotten a lot significantly easier in the last 5 years, in my mind.
Yeah, I would agree. But there's just as many easy places to open yourself up for potential danger too, I feel like, as well. There's so many just, I remember when, like, I would worry about file permissions and like audit logs, right? Now it's like, you look at the Kubernetes event log and it's like, you don't know what you're missing, and you need a whole lot of help along the way to make sure that A, you're analyzing that event log, and then B, you're doing things to prevent the badness from happening to begin with. Or to, at the very least, like I said earlier, like minimize the blast radius.
Yeah, there are. So, you know, I mentioned Ansible a few times, and Ansible is that tool that will tie legacy with modern, right?
It'll tie your network to everything, right? Like, it's kind of like the way to, you know, shift things into high gear, I feel like.
Right. So those types of tools that automate those, you know, activities to where at the far end or at the perimeter you're seeing things, and you need to automatedly shut down firewall ports based on something, or kill a container, which, you know, a service inside of Kubernetes can do that, but what tells it to do that? Like, something has to tell it there's a breach over here and it's because of your container, you need to shut down, right? And then potentially even automate all the way back to where it does some sort of analytics to say, we know it's coming from this library, go automatically update that library, rebuild the image and redeploy it. Like, you could do that, right? That's kind of an advanced thing, but you could really get it to that point by creating a true DevSecOps environment. Now, don't want to scare anybody. You don't have to, that doesn't mean you don't have DevSecOps if you don't do that, right? But
right.
Because you're going to have a different, no, I don't think I've seen anybody adopt something completely holistic and just put it in place greenfield, right?
Right.
That normally does, in a small environment, you can do that. And in some cases you should. In a big environment, it's just not possible. And we account for all that. You want greenfield? Cool. We can help you build that sucker as robust as you need it to be and as automated as you want it to be, because we do have all the vendors and we do have all the tools to do that. Or do you want to make it all work together with what you have, right? And that's what Ansible is amazing at. And we've got some Ansible security automation webinars and stuff that we've had going on, and we're going to build some workshops around that and start pushing that out. So if people are interested in that, please let us know. We're trying to gauge,
yes, they're interested.
How much we need to focus on that, but and we'll have workshops on this too. We've got 4 workshops that are coming with 4 of our partners, 2 of them this year, 2 of them next year. This is, here's our billboard for what's coming here starting next week. But Dave is the star of the first 2 at the top.
So I shared the link to the first one, I believe. Let me grab the second link from our doc here.
Yeah, the first link is to I think the Bright Talk page for this webinar series, and the second link is just our Red Hat page that announces this as well.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I shared the first one, and then shared out en masse the second one, the second link in the doc. So all of these, like, this is you at the top. Like, what are your focuses around? What's the difference between containerized applications and Kubernetes operations, right? Like, I like that there's that definitive split, because that is 2 kind of different personalities right now.
That's right. Yeah. So it is the 2 sessions at top sort of separate the development side of the house and the operations side of the house. Now, of course, DevOps is getting those folks together. So it'd be great if both personas, listened into these sessions, because it goes through, some of the stuff we talked about here, a little deeper level, but also cultural aspects for each to understand, but for each to know both sides. And then each session focuses on the Red Hat security features that developers need to know. What you should think about with OpenShift pipelines or namespaces. And on the operations side, there's service mesh and logging that we just talked about. So the security features, for developing secure container applications, it's all around OpenShift and are more for developers. And then at the 12 p.m. Eastern is security features on OpenShift for operations folks.
That's awesome. I mean, that's going to be a really great day.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. And, some very good examples below with our partner, CyberArk, Palo Alto, Synopsys, Sysdig, on how they've achieved DevSecOps and tackled things like CyberArk and secrets management, and Palo Alto and their Prisma Cloud. Synopsys has the application scanning side of the house, and Sysdig has some customer presentations to show how they've solved some issues that we've talked about today. How people or bad actors trying to get into certain customers and how those were prevented. So it's really going to be an interesting, day on November 10th of just DevSecOps.
Yeah, no, sounds awesome.
And want to make note that there's a live Q&A. Well, we haven't had a lot of questions here today.
Well, most people are like, they're not sure what question to ask at this point, right? Like, so that was a direct quote from one of our customers. So yeah, they don't know enough to know, right? Like that kind of thing.
That's what we're hearing, right? That's what, we identified that a year and a half ago, that we needed to be on this because it was so hard to understand. And even for security experts, right? This was not an easy, we had lots of, we'll just say heated discussions on how things really needed to be and what was out there in the market versus what the customer needs, and it's hard. And that's why you see the word DevSecOps thrown around a lot, and usually it's not. It's just, it might be a sliver of it, but it's not the solution.
This is our part of the DevSecOps journey, right? Like, and I think it's the right way to phrase it is a journey, because you're constantly moving forward with it, right? Like you're not stagnant. This isn't some checkbox, you're done kind of thing, right? There's going to be new ways of people to break things and new ways of securing them. And this cloud native adventure that we're on, there's 4 releases of Kubernetes a year with all new features sometimes. So securing those are always going to be something that we need to do.
Right. And the key to that too is, as Kubernetes evolves, everything evolves, right, in DevOps in general. But as Kubernetes evolves with our partners, they will evolve with that, with us. So we will assure everybody that if you use one of our certified partners, one of our strategic partners especially, that you will be able to evolve with Kubernetes and the tools will work, right?
Right.
If you go off and use somebody who's not a strategic partner, I can't guarantee that, because they're not talking to us every day, right?
We're very much focused on cloud native, Kubernetes native controls, if that makes sense, right? Like we want to make sure that as the APIs evolve in Kubernetes, your tooling's still good and you're not just all of a sudden left hanging because, you chose vendor XYZ as opposed to, someone that is thinking. And when I talk to a lot of these people, they're like, oh, this is how we're doing it. And I'm like, that's not the right way to do that in Kubernetes. And they often balk and they're like, wait, but what about blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, you're not using CRDs, you're not using any kind of custom resource of any type, and you're doing all this stuff. Why is that? And they often can't answer that. And it's like, this is GA now, right? Like, like we can do this.
Yeah, we've worked with some of the vendors that are like, well, we don't understand. Literally, they don't understand. These are super smart people, right? Yeah. And so they're like, we don't understand how this works. So we work with them to make sure that it aligns with the technology. And then, and I had another thing I wanted to say, but totally lost it. But
so excited.
Oh, I got it.
Good.
So in support of our strategic partners, we often work with them on features, right, that go upstream, because they're like, we could work a lot better if we did.
Connect to the public Wi-Fi network.
Apparently, Alexa can't connect to Wi-Fi.
So poor thing.
So we work with these features to help get them upstream so that our partners work better, right? And we do that with our strategic partners, and that way we know what's coming because we help build it, we help design it, and it makes those pieces of software work better with Kubernetes. It's a very symbiotic relationship that we only can promise our customers if they're working with our strategic partners.
Right. Very important. We got about.
And by the way, I think we're the only ones. This has been my view, my bias potentially, but I've not seen any other vendor, any other provider like Red Hat do something like this, at least not publicly. And even the SIs, the big SIs and GSIs and so forth, most of them don't have anything as comprehensive either. They have bits and pieces of it. They do have DevOps pieces, right, that are much stronger than this for DevOps, because we're not trying to solve DevOps here. But I've not seen a comprehensive framework like this from anybody. So I hope it's valuable. Right? We're getting the feedback that it is.
Yes, it does have value. I can tell you that definitively. It does have value, and the folks watching today have indicated that. We're out of time, basically. Is there anything you want to parting thought wise go with? I've dropped the link to the event in chat again, so folks know where to go to register for that. Anything else that I need to mention, or y'all want to mention?
Yeah, I think it's been said. It's good.
I think we're good. Thanks
good
for the opportunity. This has been great.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for coming on. And as soon as you can get me the slides, let me know, and I'll get those broadcast out there to everybody. Just keep an eye on my Twitter, and I'll drop it in the chat is always working in Twitch land, so I'll drop it there. So
if
don't worry, folks.
If the customers out there want a double click on anything, mean, we can literally double click on any piece of the framework with any of the partners. Tell us what partners you want to hear about. We'll bring them on. You know, what workshops you want or whatever, and we'll make it happen.
Yeah. And like, we have a whole huge list of partners, as Washari, asked me about, is Styra one of your partners? Yes, they are one of our partners. And, if you want to talk about bringing them into your fold, we can. And these are the folks to do it. And, just let me know, reach out to me, or, cshort@redhat.com. I can connect the dots for you, and you can be on your merry little way. JP Date asks, is this a regular show? Not yet. We're not adding any new regular shows until after the new year. That is for my own sanity's sake, I think, as much as it is a request from some other folks to kind of help bolster. Yeah, why not a regular show? Well, it's because I'm very busy with 17 other shows. So, but we get the point, and we will work on that. Don't you worry.
At the lake. How many shows happen at the lake, man? Come on.
Well, I mean, I am technically in Michigan, and there's probably a lake within football throwing distance of me. So,
gotcha. There you go. Well, we would be, if Chris and team will have us, we'd be happy to have this a regular occurrence. We can bring on new topics, dig deeper into different parts of the framework, and bring on our partners.
Yeah.
We have 15 strategic partners, and there's 12 months. So you do the math. We could probably do a month.
Yeah, I'm thinking we should talk more and plan something for the new year.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for watching. Have a great one.
See y'all.